All right, welcome to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I am so excited to have another episode here for you guys. Thank you for everybody that has been following, that has been sharing, liking, and just the support. I appreciate it. Just this past week or so, I got to my 20th episode. Believe this is going to be my 22nd episode when it comes out and so forth. So just thank you guys, and I appreciate it. I'm so excited for the guest that I have today. I'm not gonna give too many hints and stuff, but him himself, because I can't speak today, is just a phenomenal guy. He's been working in the arena of child welfare and different aspects of it, but also is a third generation social worker, which I think is that's very cool. Like that, like that's like very cool to me because as we all know, social work is a very selfless job, and you give a lot of yourself and you take a lot of stuff back with you, and it's not people lining up at the door to become a social worker, and everything like that. So I just really am excited for him to explain his experience and journey to becoming a social worker, and also talking about his experience and expertise and what he do now. So without further ado, I'm going to have him introduce himself.
What's going on? Thank you for having me. It's Matthew Wollack, as I call myself, the third generation child welfare social worker. Just a pleasure to be here. Excited to share some of my experience and getting right to it. My history, like most people, is a generational history. It just doesn't start with you, right? It starts with those who came before you. And that's really why I am a social worker. I always start with this basic 30 seconds of my grandpa founded Homes for Black Children back in the 1960s, which was the first minority-specific foster care agency in the nation. And that was, and still is, right in Detroit, Michigan. It's still a very active, proud, amazing agency, live and well today. So if you're looking to support a foster care agency in Detroit, Michigan, please look them up. And then my parents went on to found Wolverine Human Services, which is one of the largest child welfare and juvenile justice agencies in the state of Michigan. But that's the flyover view of what's happening. But the reality is, it really started with my grandpa. And my grandpa was in service throughout his entire life. He was in the military. And then when he finished his service and had all three of his daughters, including my mom, they landed in Michigan. And that's where he began his social work career. And the reason that I could be a third generation child welfare social worker is because I had to be the second. And that was my mother. And if my mother was not in school, she was with my grandpa doing foster care work, volunteering, at offices, doing secretary work, doing whatever the extra work that needed to be done. My mom was there. So that naturally made her, like we do, if you're around people and you get to spend your early years understanding and communicating and learning what the world really is and how different it can be for every single person, you get drawn to continuing to build those relationships and continuing to do more today for people than you were yesterday. And so I, like my mom, grew up in and out of foster care agencies. So I probably spent more time in residential treatment facilities and community centers than I did in school, because that's where we grew up. That's where we had Christmas, that's where we had Thanksgiving. I mean, I guess we had a dozen Thanksgivings and a dozen Christmases every year, because we went to, we were at every single program, whether it was foster care, adoption, or a group home, or the community centers, that's where we were. And that's how I was raised, as this is what your life is. And this is what you should be thankful to be a part of. And I guess I really took it for granted, the experience that I was getting in those scenarios. And really, once again, being able to have experiences and have conversations, and have consistency, with people was something that I later learned my peers in the suburbs, were receiving nothing, little to nothing. And I was becoming a very worldly person, not only in the things that I was doing in my own life, but really the volunteer and the family work. And I will say, the first time I really recognized that was from a teacher. And last day of senior year high school, she, Miss Convery, she was my government teacher. She pulled me into the back room and she goes, "Matt, I just want you to know, never stop talking." And tears me up because she passed away before I could tell her thank you. But she went on to say, you have experiences and you have insight from everything that you've done, and you have to tell people, and you have to share that with people, because they simply do not. And so that's something I took with me. It was something that I knew I had to continue on this path, and had to continue to be a part of this work. So that's what I did. I became a social worker, as very an emotional person here, as you can tell.
It is okay.
And but I'm very, very proud of everything that I do. And and today, what I ended up being my legacy in my current work is I now run a software company for foster care and adoption agencies, and other community mental health organizations. But now where I get to share my understanding is I get to take all of the things that I've learned growing up, that I've seen within these businesses, that I've experienced across other agencies, and I get to go and problem solve now. And I get to go and demonstrate around this country how when we use technology today, we can have a much higher rate of impact, and significant impact, and meaningful impact, getting rid of the wrong decisions that can so often happen, and making sure that we're making right, accountable decisions. And we're also making it easier for things to happen, and and the work to be done, right? One of the biggest things that I'm most concerned about is self-service for foster families and foster youth. Every child and family should be able to do on this phone what they do for their dating life, their social media life, their banking life, right, man?
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to become a foster parent, with the appropriate measures and everything, but guiding myself through the process, submitting my own paperwork, not being the burden of a caseworker who also potentially has a caseload of actually servicing families, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's ways that we can make things better, and I'm able to rely on my 3 generations of experience to do that. So I have a storied past of being able to say that my grandpa has just done amazing things, and he's truly been a founder within the circle. But the best thing he did was he shared that gift, with my mom, and she was able then to share it with me. And so that's why we're here today.
Definitely. Thank you for that. such wisdom and dare I say grace within your experience. Um, at a young age, you were embodied around this community, and it's different. It's different because me, as a person who's been through the system, I came through the juvenile side and then became a dual ward, being on juvenile and foster care, then became fully foster care. Within that instant, I had been in juvenile facilities. I had been in reality check programs, scared straight programs, Saturday boot camps, and so forth to correct behavior that started due to physical, sexual, emotional, verbal abuse. And eventually, what led me to going in the juvenile system was I had numbed out. And when people would say, for instance, attack me or bully me, I finally got to a place where I didn't care enough to just let it happen. I didn't care enough to not stop, I fought back, and me fighting back was all that trauma and hurt and pain releasing at that same time. So I, got in trouble with the law and so forth, and that led me to the juvenile side. Eventually came back with family, did home visits and stuff like that, worked on myself, but my family got to stay the same, So ended up in a guardianship, and that ended up going sour. And I told the courts I didn't want to go back home, and I stayed in the foster care system until I aged out. Overall, in my stint of care, I have been, not counting juvenile, but in foster care in over 20 different places. Juvenile, I have been in over 40 different programs and facilities and so forth. I've done everything from group homes, residential facilities, temporary holding facilities, to independent living, and young adult voluntary foster care and so forth. I've had
the full continuum of options there, right, sir?
Yes. And I continued on to, I didn't have the best experience. I didn't have the best experience, and I continued on because I didn't have the best experience. It's like, I'm not gonna be one of those people that's like, forget DHS, forget all the placements, all the staff, and whichever. I chose to be that difference and be like, let me go back and try to help them. Let me go back and look, this is my experience. It happened to me. This is my truth, and we need to do better. So I started out by just participating as a youth voice and advocating locally with MYOI, which is Michigan Youth Opportunity Initiative, and with different programs and so forth. I eventually worked in 2 different juvenile facilities in 2 different counties, and then went to work for 2 residential facilities, one being in the Saginaw area, and then one actually being in Vassar. And I worked there as a youth care worker and eventually got promoted to being a supervisor and so forth. So that's my stint. That's my experience, and I've been advocating since age 15 locally and nationally, so that gives me a little bit of 10 years of experience in my young 24-year life.
Yes, it does.
So I wanted to share that with you. So, as we continue through this conversation, my background as well as I know yours. So you've had a unique lens of being able to see what other people were going through, the disparities and so forth. And that kind of empowered you to look at it at a different lens, like, okay, we got to do better. We got to figure something out.
We can do better. Well, that's exactly. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you, but
no, you go ahead.
And I can't speak to your experiences, but I know that we share that you can do better, meaning the system can be done significantly better. And this is where one of my biggest things that I'm riding on right now is, can you imagine being a social worker in the 1970s? You're starting your career, you just got out of school. Man, you go to work and they go, hey, this is how we need you to do your job. It was written in 1920. This is how you're going to do your job. We're still operating in 1920. And these kids in the 1970s, hippies are going, what do you mean the 1920s? What? Oh man, that was a long time ago. That's how we are operating a majority of our child welfare and juvenile justice systems. They are written in 1970s child welfare acts and codes that have just been continued to be fought over by the powers that be, small changes incrementally in policy. We are operating on funding that is still very similar to the 1970s. Why would we expect better outcomes? Why would we expect there to be change? We have to be willing to rewrite, overhaul, start from the beginning and go, how can we meet people in 2020, 2030 with the resources, the technology, the education, and the understanding? Things have greatly evolved. And we have not evolved.
Mm-hmm.
So that is truly like that is where I'm at. I believe that we should, and we are not doing enough to alter where we're at and where we're going.
Definitely. I would be remiss. I would be remiss if I did not mention this. It's Black History Month, so I gotta say this. 1970s wasn't too kind to the Black and brown community. So to be working off of a system, policies, legislation, agencies, and so forth that created their bylaws and so forth, and what was going to be and how it's going to be, from a system that was created biased and racist.
100%.
Like, how do we move forward when we look at and I believe you shared a little video on LinkedIn, and I got to watch, and I kind of shared some different stats a week or so ago, that the biggest percentage of people who are entered in the child welfare system are Black and brown people.
Article just read today. LA County is working to change this, right? But 7% of the population is African-American children, yet 24% of the population in LA County child welfare system is African-American. To your point.
Wow.
Disparities.
Wow. And I've been around the policy arena nationally and locally and in different certain states, giving my little spiel and so forth. But what it seems to be the ongoing similarity is that we don't want to take the time to overhaul, to look at it for what it is. This was made then. We need to stop trying to make amendments to what was made then and just, okay, this is our child welfare system today. How can we make it better? What can we take from what is going well and add that to something that is new and that will work? And that is focused, dare I say, that it's focused towards prevention. Because if we focus on not trying to remove kids, but also having contingencies, if it's the inevitable, we can keep kids in homes. We can protect those parents. We can help educate those parents, and so forth. But the system that we have that's made up now, and it's not just Black and brown, people, youth, or minorities and so forth. There are other populations, demographics, and ethnicities that are being affected. But what seems to be the trend is the low income bracket. And if we're seeing that, how can we better support these households, these youth, and break that generational foster care, break the re-traumatization by having to go into the system and so forth. So I'm interested to hear, your take on what will be the next steps, in a perfect world. What would be the dream if we could have the opportunity to overhaul this system, what would be your starting point?
That's a really great question. My starting point would be inclusion. That's where I would start. I mean, and I can't say anything else. That's because I don't know where else to go from there.
Definitely.
All I know is today is not working, and there needs to be more shared conversations like this, right? Of people who know it's not working, and people are asking for change in the conversation to happen. And it needs to continue happening. I honestly believe that it should be happening every 25 years. You should probably write something for 5 years, enact it for 2 decades, make 5, small changes as needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in that 15th year, you start the building of the next one, right?
Right.
And you're having those, once again, those inclusive conversations that's taking account experience to the people that have been a part of the system, the people that are working within the system, the people that are educating the system, and the people that are funding the system. But there's a severe disconnect between the first 3 and the last, which is the people funding the system.
Definitely.
And if we have to have conversations about nonprofits saying, hey, we're losing, money by doing foster care and adoption services, and our parents, our parents are barely covering the cost of food. We have to fundraise to make up the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we not ensure that these people are getting the adequate funding and support to make sure that caseworkers and social workers aren't overburdened and aren't overworked, that families have enough money to feed the children that they're servicing, and then actually putting prevention services in? But we're not even willing to have a conversation about prevention services because it costs money. And where's the money going to come from? I don't know. Me personally, I don't know where the money's coming from. I know there's a large military budget out there that accounts for 50% of all federal funding. And I know that you and I are having a conversation about the unnecessary, terrible, traumatic experiences that Americans go through.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to have an inclusive conversation, and it needs to be a conversation on cycle, and there needs to be adequate funding involved.
Definitely.
Sorry, you're getting me going, Michael. I'm excited.
No, definitely. I hate to say, I hate to do this, but you can't have these conversations without getting political. And I'm a big person where, we have to prioritize as a nation. We have a crisis, not many crises that are happening here. Homelessness, drug epidemics, the foster care system, and the overpopulation of the child welfare system is a crisis, because the child welfare system that was built and so forth was not built to withstand this many kids in it. It wasn't. It was not built to be like, okay, we have over 100,000, or in this state or in this county alone, we just have this many. It wasn't meant for that.
We're just going to find willing people to volunteer and do this. The world has changed greatly, as we know. Sorry, I'm just feeding it. Sorry, keep going.
You are right. You are okay. I get it, and that's what I kind of invoking these kind of conversations, because they're needed. That's what needs to happen. And as a nation, as a people, we have to break away from the stigmas and challenge ourselves to tackle what's happening on our home front. I'm not saying, okay, stuff that happened in other countries and so forth, does not matter. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, we have had a history of focusing on other home fronts, and not focusing on our own. And in the midst, I believe we were in the middle of a war, fighting for injustice in another country. We were still having slavery and racism here, and that has not dissipated. It has been disguised in different elements and so forth. So I see where you're coming from, and I see the importance of that. Funding, it has always been a funny topic, with policymakers and legislators, which I don't get, because when we look at it this way, when you're not funding the foster care system, but funding the after effects of someone who's been in a foster care system to be in a prison cell, you're paying a lot more money, when you could prevent having to pay all that.
And on the medical system as well, right? It's a dual, because we do not have adequate psychiatric placements and treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Our ERs are overwhelmed as well. It's not just, and it's, so I don't know, those are some pretty big money making areas when you go to when you think about it, but the hospitals are screaming in crisis. They want psychiatric placements. They need psychiatric beds open, because we are facing another issue. We're in a pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. And they no longer have the ability to service those people, which they should not be being serviced in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, where is the funding, the appropriate funding for community mental health preventative services?
Yes. And
much needed psychiatric support services beyond that, right? In the continuum. And it feels as though these things continue to be the 1970s funding and or cut since then. And I know there's always increases, and I know that, but I would just argue that it hasn't been appropriate enough increases to keep up with the cost of living, to keep up with technology, to keep up with the pace of the world as we know it today. Definitely.
Yes, and I know we both can kind of go on and on that. I want to touch on a different space, and I don't know if you're aware, but there's been a lot of different policy changes and so forth, and in the state of Michigan and across the country, because of these policy changes that was enacted, with Family First and so forth, the Family First Act. A lot of facilities are closing, and with facilities closing, and not having homes for them to put the kids, now we're in a place where, okay, these residentials, these CCIs, I'm just going to say CCIs for the whole category, are closing, due to, rule restrictions or whatever, whatever the outcome may be. Now we're in a place as a caseworker, social worker, I got to figure out where to place this kid. They keep them a couple nights at the, local agency office because they're still trying to figure out,
which is breaking.
They only could do that so many times,
They shouldn't be doing it at any time.
Right.
Sorry, I know where you're going, and you already know where I'm gonna go. So
right. And after that, after you're like, okay, we have no homes available, they put them in a juvenile facility after they have probably been removed because they have been sexual abuse, physical abuse, or whichever. So now, because our juvenile system, there's a misbalance because we're still operating off of those old mindsets. We think anybody that walks to a juvenile facility is a delinquent, is a criminal, has done things, and so the staff members that are working in there, aren't in a mindset, oh, I need to be a little bit more courteous or be mindful or have therapeutic crisis intervention, or
they're not given that. They're not given that, right? They're in a cell being held.
And I'm a firm person that believes, because I've been on both sides of the fence, whether you have committed a crime or whether you have entered this child welfare system, foster care, therapeutic crisis intervention that needs to be the forefront of the treatment. You know, it isn't, oh, you need to serve your time because you did something wrong. We need to spank you in the hand. No, because it's something that led that person as a juvenile, as an adolescent, to commit that. So let's get to the root of that, whether they have trauma and been in the fact of, you know, oh, well, I'm being removed because my parents didn't want me, or I'm being removed because this happened to me. That should not be it. We got to get rid of the labels of why adolescents are coming into care and just treat them as a consistent basis, because, you know, whether it looks like this or it quacks like this, you know.
It's a child that has significant traumatic issues. And that was something that my mother always taught me. People would ask, where do your kids come from? And well, we would go, they can come from either, you know, a family court or a juvenile court, which is one and the same, but it's really just where they were at in the age in their life. Was it that they were arrested for, I don't know, flipping cars because they needed to make ends meet and feed their family? Or was it because they were malnutrition, or, you know, at school, and it looked like abuse and neglect because their mom and dad aren't home and they're being raised by their brother who's stealing cars? Those are the same family that are going through the same traumatic issues. People are just at different ages, right? And so to your point, right? Yeah, it's the child is the same. And to your larger point, what's happening is, at some level, you know, with Families First, is a CCI, for whatever reason, is being labeled bad, even though, you know, now they are, a lot of them are evidence-based, trauma-informed, and as we call them, they're the ICUs of the child welfare system. Nobody wants a child to go to the ICU. Nobody wants anybody in the hospital to go to the ICU, right? But we know that there has been so many traumatic incidences that an experience that this child has gone through, that maybe a foster home is not going to be the most immediate, safest place for them and or the community. And we need to have treatment-based options where people are highly trained and certified and educated, and we need to compensate them so they don't burn out. Those are the people, those are the facilities that we need in place, right? And you can't shut those things off when you haven't recruited all the foster care parents and you haven't trained all of the foster care parents. You can't, that's not how this works. So what ends up happening, as you said, right now there are hundreds of children in Michigan sleeping in hotel rooms. There are even more children today than there have been in out-of-state facilities that are not licensed by the state of Michigan.
Right.
That are not being monitored by the state of Michigan, that we cannot drive to and go and check on those children and make sure what is happening is happening. If there is a claim from one of our children, we're flying down, we're doing what we need to do. So I think everything should be trauma informed, and I think it becomes extremely inappropriate to start housing kids in juvenile detention facilities because we decided that, you know, we're going to shut down the rest. It wasn't, let's invest greater into these places. Let's make sure everybody has a master's in social work that works at a residential treatment facility. Let's make sure they're all paid, you know, $75,000 instead of $40,000 and arguing with nonprofits about this. I would demand that we should be elevating all of these things, and we should be investing greater into it. And we should, a child should never be in a lockup.
Yeah.
Period.
I go as far as saying they're not even lockups. You know, the experience I had was basically my mindset was I need to do my time and get out. You know, so I look at those facilities as mini prisons, as jails. You know, and what that does to you, because I remember coming home from home visits, and even when I aged out, I remember pacing back and forth because I didn't know if I could go use my own bathroom. I didn't know on a home visit if it was okay for me to do this because I was so used to you got to be quiet in the day room. You gotta
Right.
you gotta ask staff for this, or you only certain amount of meals, and so forth. And these is what happening in our juvenile facilities. And I'm not taking away from the account because I've worked in these facilities and so forth. They do great things, they do great work, but the government isn't supporting them, so they only can do what is manageable, and they can't fully train the staff how they should be trained because of the low funding. And nonetheless, you got to get in where you fit in. If you have a facility, and most of the people in the area that's willing to work it there does not have a degree or just have high school experience, who do you hire? The people that does, and so forth. And to speak to the extent, I'm a firm person that believes that, we need to revamp the whole system. That means from CCIs, residential juveniles, whichever. I believe what we're doing is not working. But I'm also a person that believes that the foster care system isn't going away. Residential treatment facilities aren't going away. Juvenile facilities aren't going away. So we need to put out an outline, and this outline does not, and I say this, it can come from our state policy and legislators, but it needs to come from the federal government, and that outline be consistent throughout this entire nation. This is what needs to happen.
I agree. Sorry, keep going. That's the one thing that they haven't standardized is residential treatment facilities, and it should not be what's the cheapest. Sorry, I'm going. It should be. Oh, that's the most expensive. Tell us why. Oh, I can see you have X, Y, and Z in this, and that's going to ensure that we are going to get greater results. Oh, the cheapest guy? Yeah, they're not going to have anybody. Let's go with that deal. Sorry, that's Michael. Keep going. We need to overhaul the entire thing.
Definitely. And one of the biggest things, because I've worked as a youth care worker, and as a supervisor over youth care workers and so forth. One of the things is we have to recognize social work and youth care work and all these different things that aren't getting paid how they should be getting paid and what that does to that individual, and we wonder why we're seeing, well, my worker did this and so forth. Like, we got to look around. What was the scope? They came in as a good worker. They came in as a good youth care worker. They passed the interview, passed the background and so forth. What happened in between that time to make there be an incident that happened, or whichever. So we have to look at that too, and when we're talking about this overhaul, when we're talking about the experience for these youth, it's not that they don't have the proper education and so forth as a youth care worker. It's about being able to have the proper funds to invest in the people once you get them, and being able to surround around them and support them, whether they be workers for the state, whether they be working in juvenile facilities, whether they be working in residential facilities, group homes, ILPs, or whichever. We need to invest in the people who are doing that because they endure a lot.
They do.
I remember, I
didn't front line like you for a lot.
And so forth. As a youth care worker, I've been remember racist slurs and so forth, and I had to maintain my composure, And the thing is, that's trauma. And where does that trauma go? You get the training, you get the spiel, in training, but after you endured so much of it, it comes back home with you.
Yep.
It's imprinted in you. So, how can we take care of those people, to make sure that they're able to do this job, and this job is taken serious enough that they can live off of it,
The youth care worker should be making, in my opinion, minimum starting $25 an hour. And there should be obviously extensive more training going, and then there should be consistent on-site training happening, right? Mm-hmm. And then there should be fair, maybe instead of 3 shifts, we're running 4 shifts, right? Mm-hmm. And then as well, as you said, there should be reflective supervision, as it's called, in which you discuss your personal feelings and trauma or whatever it may be with your supervisor, who should be trained, right?
Mm-hmm.
and you're having that back and forth dialogue. And we're hoping that we can pay people, $15 an hour if the state's willing to, provide it. And that's not enough for, as you know, the frontline workers. Like, this is, I did it for 5 years, I had tons of great experiences, but me and you had a lot, you have the shared experiences. You're called racial slurs, you're spit on, you're bit, you're punched, and you can't, you can't do anything. You have to be the staff. You have to be the appropriate person. You have to be the guiding light through that time. And you have to hold a lot of personal restraint. But to your point, it bears, it weighs, and it changes you. And once again, until the funding source acknowledges these things, and stops bringing in consultants and actuaries, aka accountants, and from the outside to say, well, this is how we believe it should be done, and this is how much it should get paid. Start asking the nonprofits, start asking the kids, start asking the staff members. Start with the people that are doing and experiencing the work within your own community before relying on other people because they're experts, paid experts, on what to do. So sorry, I keep going.
No, that definitely
you got me, man.
I think it's very important. And I just, go back to my days. I remember, working, and in order to make ends meet, a low income was considered, for me, $743 for rent. As an aged out youth, my car insurance was $596.
Yeah.
This is before the revamp.
Yeah.
So as a person that is young, between 18 and 19, that is working as a youth care worker and so forth, I'm in college, and in that arena, I'm looking at all the stuff I got going on, in life. I was lucky to be one of those people that knew the experience, so I could maintain my composure in a space of chaos. But I always thought back to, like, people who have their own sets of issues. We look at today's society. Nationally, it's said that a person needs to be making at least working two or three minimum wage jobs to survive. To survive.
100%.
Nonetheless, most people, who are working in these youth care worker experience, most of them are working there, either, from a generational experience, they had a parent that worked there and they caught up and so forth, or they're going to school for social work.
Yep.
So it's a passing point, and there's nothing wrong with that, because it's added experience for them. But if you're going to school, or you have other things like kids and so forth, and you coming to a job, or and it doesn't seem worthwhile because the places don't have the proper funding to be able to support you. How do you stay? So that's for my listeners and everything, and I hope some of you guys that are policymakers and so forth, you guys can hear this conversation and it sparks something within you guys. But as I was advocating and started to advocate, I got to be able to see from many different lenses of my experience that parts of our system won't go away. We will always need somewhat of a child welfare system. We will always need juvenile facilities and so forth, and residential facilities. But what can we do to make them better? Just like me and Matthew have spoken and so forth, revamping it from looking at people as criminals and delinquents or people who've done bad things, taking that negativity out of it and coming at a more clinical, therapeutic, holistic healing, and surrounding around the mental health and the patterns that have led them to be here. And even if they just got there because they had nowhere to go, there's still places in that they need to work through. So I believe we have to look at the entry and the exit of foster care, whether they're aged out or entering in that, be via CPS or whichever, and we have to embody that person coming into that system, and they're in a crash moment. Like when we're looking at the ICU analogy, like they're pretty much in critical condition right now, mentally. They're coming in there, their world has just folded. What are we doing in that moment of entry to that moment that they're at a residential facility, a place, or they realize they can't go home? What are the steps that we're making? Because what we're seeing as after effects, side effects to being re-traumatized once you coming to the child welfare system, having gone to these residential facilities, being in these juvenile facilities, is that a little bit more damage has happened. Yep. A little bit more. And what happens with that damage is they go out and try to cope. And we find unhealthy habits of coping, whether it's using substances or relationships, or committing certain crimes and so forth, or suicide, or you find yourself just in another system as an adult. Those are the side effects of undealing, and not having the proper care when you needed it, and so forth. And then we also have this expectation. I was speaking on another podcast. We also have this expectation that once that person ages out at 18, they're good. Or once they get to 24, 25, we should stop funding, or we should really stop supporting. They got it. But we have to realize wherever that person had trauma, they can be stagnant where that place of trauma is. That's scientifically proven. Yes, it is scientifically proven that the brain stops developing at 25, they're more mature and so forth. But I don't think that takes into account the brain of someone who has suffered significant trauma. And we have to look at that within policy, within legislation, and understand how can we support people from putting them from what it looks like one pipeline to the next pipeline until the day they die. Right. That's my little spiel.
My big thing right now too is 20% of kids in foster care that age out are homeless at the age of 18, which is day they age out of foster care. And it can be upwards of 75% by the age of 25 have experienced homelessness. So when we're talking about homelessness on top of suicide prevention and everything else, but you brought up earlier, homelessness is a major problem within this nation everywhere. Mm-hmm. Well, it's because the child welfare system is also a major problem, and it's a contributing factor. Mm-hmm. And if we are able, like you said, to understand that every second and every minute counts within these traumatic situations, just like we were at a hospital, right? We're going to the ER to get assessed, right, by the appropriate people at the right time in the right way. And then if needed, going back home, right, we're okay. Mm-hmm. Or if we're being escalated, and at that point, we're going to monitor, or we just need to go right into the ICU, right, with the trained mm-hmm. professionals. But every decision, every second counts. Yeah. And the longer you wait or you make that wrong decision, there can and will be lasting effects.
Definitely. I was talking to another person that I was interviewing, and telling them about one of the ideas I have for legislation and policy. As a person who aged out at 18, and they kept me in until I finished my high school diploma in the independent living program. And if it wasn't for a diagnosis that I no longer had, but I had the paperwork, being able to utilize that to kind of finesse getting into an apartment, I would have been homeless, but in college, at least I had the college, would have been homeless, and so forth. in college, and that even then I ended up dropping out of college, because I needed to figure out, how home, I need to figure out working and bills. But what I wanted to say about that experience is, a person is going to either age out, be emancipated, or whatever that looks like, because I know it's different in other states and so forth, by age 16, 17. What are we doing? Because there is resources. There's, different programs through HUD and everything. What are we doing to make sure that these people are on the policy-ridden housing vouchers and so forth, before they get to 18? Because these housing voucher lists are, 2 years, a year long. So how can we better, prevent that homelessness?
Right.
And one of the biggest things that came to mind is, writing in policy and legislation federally exceptions for states to be able to have youth at age 16, 17 apply. So when they get to 18, they are either close to getting their name pulled or their name is getting pulled off of those lists for those vouchers. Right. And also understanding the process of those vouchers. That doesn't mean just because you get a voucher, you should, you're good and everything like that. Create wraparound supports around that. In our state, we have YVAC, which is Young Adult Voluntary Foster Care. And there had to be a lot of different exceptions with COVID happening and stuff like that, people not really able to maintain jobs and stuff like that. But we have to understand that we have to give people grace. Everybody isn't going to mature. Everybody is not going to adapt. Everybody is not going to be in a place where they can maintain self-stability. Because what happens is in our system now, around age 16, 17, 18, you realize that the world is about to hit you, that happens without being in the foster care system.
Right.
So you're in like a state of shock, but crisis mode, but dare I say, survival mode, trying to figure out what's next. So you're not even thinking rationally in slowing things down.
Yeah,
you're just impulse, So you're going to probably mess up your credit. You're probably going to mess up school. You probably going to mess up your car insurance and so forth. You're probably going to get your first ticket because you forgot to, register your plate or whichever, A lot of these things are these are natural things that happen, but we add on additional, this person has been in care. So, why are we punishing these people when they are having natural occurrences, instead of supporting them?
And we gave them zero resources to do any of this. Now this is also my other thing is like, I'm all about math and science and STEM and I love it. But I also think that in high school, we should be teaching what insurance is, how to sign up for insurance. I think we should be teaching how to work with the government. These are the requirements of being a citizen. You got to register your car. Here's how you register your car, right? Here's how to plan for retirement. And here is I believe that not only do we do a disjustice to all citizens by not educating them for the basic aspects of life today, you then talk about a foster child aging out who does not have any of the social supports that are expected to be your guide during those processes, right? And to your point, what happens if you don't have a guide and you're going down a whitewater rapids and you don't even know what an oar is and what side to use the paddle, right? You're just hoping you stay in the boat and you're going along for the ride and you're hoping, eventually it pulls over to the side or the river slows down and you can figure it out. But yeah, I don't think we should be people throwing foster kids down the river without a paddle.
Definitely. Thank you for that. I believe we've had, we touched on a lot of different points there, and so forth, getting ready to, close us out and so forth. What tips and tidbits do you have, for social workers, for foster care alumni, and just people that need to know about this community and so forth?
So one of the things that I think is the most important is self-care. and and I say that for the social workers, I say that for the alumni, I say that for the people doing the work. It's something that you're taught in your master's programs, do self-care. And I didn't really understand it. They would come around the room to me and they would go like, Matt, how's your self-care? I'd be like, I'm pretty good. Like, and they're like, well, yeah, you got this thing under, you seem pretty normal and got it in control. But as I've gotten older, I have now truly appreciated and understand the importance of meditation, and yoga and mindfulness. And I think it's something that everyone and anyone can practice. I have extreme anxiety. I get panic attacks all the time. So yoga and mindfulness and meditation is just something I preach with anything and everything. And then beyond that, also anybody who's listening, who's outside of the foster care community or is a politician, the only thing that I can say is we need more funding. We need more support. We want to be better. We want to do better for the kids, and the families. And these are our citizens and these are our people, but we can't do it unless you acknowledge that there is a foster care crisis and there is a child welfare crisis. And the best way to solve a crisis is by bringing in resources and professionals and help and acknowledgement and shared conversations. So that's my two sides of the coin.
Thank you. And lastly, what is next for you, on this journey?
On this journey, next for me is just literally helping as many agencies as I can with their technology and software needs. And I will tell you, I am learning about some amazing services that are happening across this nation that I didn't know were needed, that I didn't know existed. And I just, all I'm here to do is support those people, make sure that they can be successful. And beyond that, dude, I'm doing awareness. I'm trying to be like you. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to use my voice as much as I can for as long as I can for anybody who's going to listen, that we can do better. And if you don't know what's going on, I'm going to tell you what's going on. And if you need a solution, I'm going to point you in the right direction of people who know what they're talking about.
Definitely. Well, I just want to say it is a great honor to have you on. I appreciate it. We definitely would love to do this again as you continue to do your work and so forth and build awareness around this. But such a privilege, to be able to have you on here. So thank you.
Hey, the privilege was all mine. And this was amazing. This was better than I expected. Rarely do I get to have these types of conversations with people in an unfiltered way, and making sure that people hear the truth about what's going on there. And you and I, we've seen different parts of the system, but at the end of the day, we both know it can be better.
Definitely. So, thank you. And as I end out, I always do this spiel because, COVID is here. It is out here. It ain't going nowhere. I may be exaggerating. It may go somewhere in a couple of years. But for now, it's not going anywhere. So what can we do? If we're thinking about, getting vaccinated, or if you're already vaccinated, whatever that is, stop procrastinating, get it done. If you're not getting vaccinated, that is your choice. Not gonna get political, not gonna choose sides or whichever. But what both parties need to do, vaccinated, non-vaccinated, keep wearing your mask. Keep wearing your mask. Make sure you're washing your hands. Make sure you're disinfecting. Make sure that you're taking precautions with your kids and so forth who are going to school and everything. Just do what you can to make sure that your village and yourself is okay. And by doing that, our big community, this nation, this great nation of the United States, I'm saying that as a community, we're taking care of one another. So just take care of yourself and you're taking care of millions. I just want to thank you guys for listening, and being a part of another episode of Resilient Voices and Beyond. I hope you guys have a great night, a great evening, a great morning. Whenever you're listening to this, just let it be great and let it be well. So you guys stay safe, and thank you guys for listening.